שתחדישו עלינו את החודש הזה לטוב ולברכו שתחדישו עלינו את החודש הזה לטוב ולברכו שתחדישו עלינו את החודש הזה לטוב ולברכו
Hello everyone. MALEY RACHAMIM on Shabbos MEVARCHIN, and today we're going to get to the real McCoy. What are the opinions about saying it on Shabbos MEVARCHIN? So the Maharil comes along and says, "B'Shabbos MEVARCHIN b'Rosh Chodesh ein maskirim bo neshamot," and that's the way the Rama paskins. V'yesh mekamot she'en omrim oto k'shemevarchin hachodesh. And indeed, the Mishnah Berurah says that on days in which you bench Rosh Chodesh ein maskirim bo neshamot. And he goes on to say that even if you say Avarachamim during Sfira, because that's the time that the Crusades happened, that Avarachamim was ultimately authored, even so, you still don't say a Kel Maleh for someone that died that week. Now, this particular opinion of the Rama splits into two. The Pri Megadim comes along and says, even for someone that died that week, you don't say a Kel Maleh. But the Maharil comes along and says that if he did die that week, you would say a Kel Maleh because it's all the more important. Based on what we said last week, indeed, the Shibbolei Haleket says it's even more important to say it on Shabbos because he's resting. We want the dead to continue to rest. So indeed, it would be important to say it on Shabbos for someone that freshly was just buried. Namely, he's someone that's indeed coming before God in judgment within days. And that's what the Magen Avraham paskins, that indeed shemevarchin hachodesh in maskirim neshamot rak lamishin ikvar be'oto shavua. So that's basically the general psak halacha, sometimes unknown. Many people say, oh, that's at Shacharit, but not at Mincha. The Rama doesn't make a difference between Shacharit and Mincha. He doesn't say one word about the difference between Shabbos and Mincha. Shabbos Mevarchin begins at night, ends at night, and the whole entire time, you're not allowed to say a Kel Maleh. And that's the way I basically went ahead and did it myself, because my father, Zichronu Levracha, died on Rosh Chodesh. By default, his yortzeit will always be on Rosh Chodesh, and therefore Shabbos Mevarchin is Shabbos before his yortzeit. And I always made sure not to say a Kel Maleh on that Shabbos, but rather to find the closest date possible where we read the Torah to say it based on the opinion of the Chazon Ish we quoted last time. However, lo and behold, as we get later in life, we find that the later Achronim of our generation had a different perspective. The Shmirat Shabbos Gehilchasa, written by Rav Yoshua Neubert, he had to violate Shabbos in order to save his life during the Shoah, and he decided he's going to devote his life to Shabbos, and he wrote that monumental book on Hilchos Shabbos. That was one of the first that was clear, coherent, with footnotes. Rav Yoshua Neubert writes that indeed you do not say a Kel Maleh on Shabbos Mevarchin. It only means Shacharit, but after Mincha, it's okay. And the only time you can't say it at Mincha is if it's a Shabbos in which you don't say Tachanun. If it's a Shabbos where you won't say Tzitkot at Mincha, namely it's a day you don't say Tachanun, whatever it might be, like Erev Purim, then you don't say Kel Maleh at Mincha. But if it's a time that you do say Tachanun in general, you could say it at Mincha and not at Shacharit. And he explains there in footnote Reish Pei Chet, talking about the times where we read the four parshios before Purim and after Purim. The Kedushat Arba Parshiot inamit Pachet L'chol Hayom. The Kedusha, the sanctity of the four parshios, namely it's a Shabbos where we read not one but two Kriyos HaTorah. One is the parsha of the week and the other is the addition. Parshat Shkolim, Parshat Zachor, Parshat Para, and Parshat HaChodesh. That added Kedusha is only at Shacharis. It's not at Ma'ariv, and it's not at Mincha. It doesn't go the entire day. V'ilu, however, Rosh Chodesh, a day that's a Rosh Chodesh, starts at night and ends at night. It's an entire day where you don't say Tachanun, and therefore you can't say Kel Maleh. Basically, he basically comes and says, there is no specific sanctity to Shabbos Mevarchin at all. There's a minhag not to say it at Shacharis after you bench Rosh Chodesh. Maybe it has to do with the heebie-jeebies. You want a good next month to be a good month? Don't mention the dead. Okay. Shmir Shabbos Gehilchasa goes on and says that umikol makom, third opinion, Afa Omer Kel Maleh Rachamim b'chol Ela Hayamim yesh lo mi lismoch. And indeed he says, listen, if you say Kel Maleh even on Shabbos Mevarchin, it's all right. On any of these days where you don't say Tachanun, it's also okay. Why? He goes and says in footnote number 8, Sadik Bet, look in the Shulchan Aruch, Taf Kuf Mem Zayin. So I did you all a big favor, and I looked in the Shulchan Aruch, Taf Kuf Mem Zayin, and indeed he says there, the fact that we say at the end of the year, we do a eulogy and we say this and we say that, that's okay. You can do it within 30 days before Yontiv, as we said last time, because not that we're trying to get people to cry. Hafuch, we're trying to get people to stop their avelus. And therefore the Mishnah Berurah says, and I quote, "Ve'ein ze ma shenoagin laskir neshamot bekel malei rachamim, shezeh af beregel atzmo mutar, ve'eino esped ela shemitpalelim aleihen." Once again, as we said last time, Kel Malei is not a eulogy, but rather it is going and davening on behalf of the dead. From this perspective, it would be mutter on Yontif, we say it in Yizkor, and all the more so on Shabbos, where there isn't even a mitzvah of Simcha. So, even though the Rama is very clear, and the only heter might be, according to the Rama, on the week that the person died, the Shmirat Shabbos Ge'ilchasa comes along and says, and obviously based on poskim, even that you're allowed to do it at Mincha, and then he gives even a bigger avenue and says if you did it at Shacharit, it's not so bad, because on Yontif itself, when there's a mitzvah of Simcha, we do it at Shacharit, and it's called Yizkor. Therefore, to sum up, the bottom line is that if you follow generally the Rama, the Ashkenazic practices, do not say Hakel Malei on Shabbos Mevarchin, unless the person died that week. However, if you feel a need to say it Dafka on Shabbos, because the Shibbolei Haleket says they're resting, we want them to continue to rest, then wait till Mincha. And if there's a great need, you can't make it to Mincha, there's even room to allow it at Shacharit, since we allow it on Yontif itself.